you are welcome. We are Word of Life Christian Center Toronto. We have our meetings here every Friday at 8 p.m. We have our Bible study today or tonight. We have a different kind of meetings where we have a doctor, a medical doctor in our midst who will be talking to us about COVID-19 vaccine. As most of you know, at least for those who are part of this ministry, we have been talking about COVID-19 and the mark of the beast. From the spiritual standpoint, we've showed through the Bible that COVID-19 vaccine cannot be the mark of the beast for many reasons. So if you miss those messages, they are available in our YouTube channel. So when you at the end, when we give the announcement, we'll tell you exactly how to join or how to view some of these meetings. Okay, so Dr. William is in our midst. Praise God. So,
Amen.
Dr. William has more than 30 years in the medical field. He knows his stuff very well. He will be going through the presentation, the short presentation, and he told me he wanted to spend most of the time in a Q&A to answer the question that people have. So he will do a short presentation for us to know a little bit about the disease, to know mostly about the vaccine, and then after that we're gonna go to Q&A. So Q&A, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can put it in the chat window, and then we will read it. We'll read it for you. Before we proceed, we also have another doctor among us, the Dr. Oso Chabikuli. I saw him joining, so I'm very happy. Someone I know from many years ago, also a good friend of Dr. William. So Dr. William, over to you. And yeah, so we start with the presentation and we're gonna go to Q&A. So we have until 9:30.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good evening to everyone. So let's go to the presentation. And let me see. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my talk here. Okay.
Take your time. Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Okay, can you see?
Yep.
All right. So we'll be talking about a COVID-19 disease, and this is going to be a short meeting trying to highlight some of the points that I thought are important to understand. I will try to speak in a layman language. So if there are words that you do not understand, you can just write them down. And at the time of Q&A, I can always go back without starting. So I'm Dr. William Mwintshi. I have no association with the CDC, the FDA, or any pharmaceutical company. I'm a private citizen, practicing doctor, so I'm not doing any commercial or any promotion of any product whatsoever. So to start with COVID-19, what does that come from? The CO, the CO is for corona, the V is from the virus, the D is from the disease, and the number 19 is because the coronavirus was discovered in 2019. There are many coronaviruses. This is just one of them out of a group of multiple viruses, coronaviruses. And they call corona because of the shape like a crown. So what is known about a COVID-19? It's an infection from the coronavirus. It's the scientific name is SARS-CoV-2, but you can just call it the coronavirus, which causes the disease called COVID-19. And the disease spectrum is very wide, very wild. You have people who have almost no symptoms or completely asymptomatic, don't even know they have the disease, to people who are very ill, who end up being in an intensive care or ICU and even die. So it's a very broad spectrum kind of disease. And the biggest challenge we have with COVID-19 is we have no way to tell in advance how will each person will react. There are cases where in the same family, two siblings or husband and wife get a disease, one get a fairly mild disease and the other one get a severe disease. I know cases like that. I've lost a very close friend of mine a couple of months ago in South Africa. Him and his wife both got a disease, but his wife was very mild and unfortunately he succumbed to the disease. And people who are, what we know at least is the older you are, the more likely the disease is going to be serious. Although with the latest variant, things have been, the Delta variant, things have been a little bit different because now we're even seeing younger people, even children being ill. But by and large, the older, the more likely the disease will be severe, or if the person has what we call comorbidities, meaning if a person has pre-existing diseases like bad diabetes, or they have kidney failure, liver disease. The idea is because those people immune system or the defense mechanism is sort of weakened, therefore when they get a virus, they tend to have a more severe disease. But again, this is just in general. I've personally seen cases where people had coexisting morbidities and they have not had such a disease. So it's a new virus because it was discovered in 2019. We know it was discovered in China, in the Wuhan lab, and became a pandemic declared last year on March 11. So the way people get it usually is from other people. We don't really get it from anything else. It's spread through droplet, like when people sneeze, when people cough, when people talk, that's when you get those the droplet. And it's widely believed that the maximum goes, it's about up to 2 meters, but there is increasing belief that if you are in a room which is poorly ventilated, those particles or those droplets might linger around longer and get you infected, even if you are not within the 6 feet or 2 meters away from the person who is contaminated. That's why the indoor contamination is much common than the outdoor because of the concentration, particularly if the room is poorly ventilated. So the symptom commonly, the coronavirus or the COVID-19 has symptoms very similar to the common flu: fever, cough, sore throat, fatigue, body aches. But what is more peculiar to it is the element of shortness of breath. For people who have very severe disease, they will tend to have the respiratory system being involved, which will result in shortness of breath, which can be so severe that they may end up in an intensive care unit on a ventilator, which is rather rare with the common flu. So beside the shortness of breath, most of the symptoms are very similar to the common flu. But again, it's important to remember, as I said earlier, that we have a wide spectrum of disease presentation. You have people who have the disease or the virus who are completely asymptomatic. Some will have just a little bit of a cough, a little bit of fatigue, loss of taste, but some will have the full-blown disease. And by and large, people recover almost fully within 2 weeks, except those who proceed with severe complication. So when you look at the outcome, about 1 in 6 people who get the COVID-19 disease will experience shortness of breath. which can be mild to very severe, as said earlier. About 1 in 20 will end up in hospital. And currently we're seeing that most likely in the unvaccinated population. And if you look at the latest data, the unvaccinated are 20 times more likely to be hospitalized, because people are vaccinated, although they can still get a disease, but it tends to be a milder form. The vaccine will protect mostly from the severity of the disease. And when you look at mortality, they look at 0.05%. There are even studies which says about 1 in 150 who catch the disease will die. Now, somebody can say, well, it's not so bad. It's only 1 in 150. That's true, but if you start looking at a pandemic, which is widely spread, it means if you have 150 million people getting the disease, which is fairly possible, you'll have about 1 million deaths. So I just want to draw your attention not onto the ratio of 1 to 150, but take in consideration also the fact that this is a pandemic, meaning it's widely spread across many countries. Therefore, the 0.05%, which might appear small, but at the scale of a global population, become very significant. We're just talking about death here. So how to prevent getting the disease? Wear a mask that covers your mouth and nose. I don't know about you in Canada where it's a problem, but unfortunately in the United States, wearing the mask has been politicized for reasons which are very unclear to me. The science is clear. It's not a theory. If you cover your mouth and your nose, not only you're protecting yourself, but you're also protecting the other people in case you are contaminated. Remember, I said there are some people who have the asymptomatic form. So it's entirely possible that you have the disease, you are capable of contaminating people around you, but because you don't know, you might just be spreading the disease. So if you wear a mask which covers your mouth and nose, you will be protecting other people. So that's something to remember. The mask protects us, but also protect the people around us. And of course, avoid close contact with others. Remember, we spoke about 2 meters or 6 feet. That's where the droplet from talking, laughing, sneezing can contaminate you. Avoid crowd. And again, as I say, poorly ventilated spaces. Why poorly ventilated? Because in an indoor setting, those droplets will linger around longer, will be suspended in the air, even if you are beyond 6 feet. But because those droplets are there, those viral particles, you'll end up inhaling them and get a disease. Wash hands often with soap and water, because you never know who you touch. You might not shake hands, but you can touch the doorknob. And you can touch many things, although and you with at least are not avoid touching your with unwashed hands for the reason you get frequently there, and of course get a COVID-19 vaccine. What is the vaccine and how does it work? Well, in general, vaccines prevent diseases that can be dangerous or even deadly. They work with your body's natural defense to safely develop protection from a disease. So what vaccines do is a part of a microorganism, or the microorganism itself, is injected in your system, but this part is not capable of causing a disease. It just gives the viral or micromaterial in your body, and it will trick your immune system into mounting a response to produce antibodies, so that next time when you get exposed to the real virus, you are ready to fight. Okay. So what are the benefits of getting a COVID-19 vaccine? I know there's a hot topic for several reasons. COVID-19 vaccination will help us, will help keeping you from getting sick from COVID-19. So not only it decreases the chances of getting the disease, even if you get a disease, it's less likely to be severe. Even if it gets a little severe, it's less likely to result in death. So just that, I think it's really making a case. COVID vaccine available in the US, even in Canada as well, and Europe, have all been shown to be very effective. And the best way really to protect oneself is to, to follow the combination of getting vaccinated and following the CDC recommendation to protect yourself and others. So in other words, you get vaccinated, but because the disease is still rampant, because unfortunately we still have a large population who is not vaccinated, the virus is still circulating in the population, and there could be mutations which can one day be resistant to the vaccine. So that's why it's important, even though you get vaccinated, you still avoid crowd, you wear your mask indoors so that you stop the disease from progressing. And eventually, the more people get vaccinated, the faster we'll go to get to our normal lives. Why? Because if you are vaccinated, you are like a stop to the virus from spreading, because this virus will not live outside of your body. For the virus to exist, it has to be in a human body. So as long as there will be people who are not vaccinated who catch the disease, the virus will continue to exist and cause misery in our life. And furthermore, the virus can mutate and become resistant to the non-medications or even to the vaccine that we have. So if we have a way to vaccinate, the magic number is about 80 to 85% of the population of the world, then the virus will not find bodies where it can multiply, and therefore the disease will most likely disappear. That's the so-called herd immunity. So there are many vaccines, but as far as the US, we have three vaccines which have received emergency use authorization by the FDA, but from actually early this week, Pfizer has received the full authorization. So we have Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, or otherwise called Janssen. Those three vaccines are safe and highly effective. And I should say the AstraZeneca, which is available in Canada and Europe, is also safe and highly effective. And the effectiveness of this disease is not only focusing mostly on getting the disease, but it's actually the seriousness of the illness. Think of it this way: if the COVID was only giving us a mild aches, like a common cold, it would be a big deal if you get it. The problem is, since we do not know who's going to get the severe illness versus the one who's going to get mild or asymptomatic, that's why we are all in a frenzy. We try to vaccinate everybody. So that's why the vaccine focuses more on the illness or the sickness, the severity of the sickness, rather than just the contamination. If you get a vaccine and you can get a disease which can be mild, of course, it's better you don't get it at all. But if you get some kind of security that even if you get a disease, it's not going to be severe, it's already a big thing. So most of those studies on the vaccines were done in terms of looking at seriousness of illness, hospitalization, and death. The Pfizer, Moderna, as well as AstraZeneca require 2 doses. And to be fully vaccinated, meaning to have your immune system really well charged, you need the 2 doses. For the Johnson & Johnson, it's 1 dose. There is more evidence coming now that after 5, 6, or up to 8 months, the immunity can start coming down, and there's a need for a booster. The data is still coming in. In Israel, they're already giving it, and I think in the United States also will start giving it. I haven't followed the news about Canada and Europe, but it seems like we do get good immunity, but those immune response or these antibodies with time will start decreasing. That's when we need a booster to get the level up again to protect us from getting severe illness. So how do we know if the vaccine is safe. This is the big question. You know, you're healthy, everything is fine. You know, when you're sick, it's okay. You understand you're sick, you need to get something. But when you're healthy, it's kind of difficult for many people to go and get something shot in the system, in the body, when they feel fine. So we got to know that the vaccine is safe. So how do we know that? It's an extensively studied. A small group of people receive a trial vaccine. So when the vaccine is developed, they will start with a small group of volunteers who will get a trial vaccine. And then after that, they go to a bigger group. They try to give it to a specific group, which is pretty, you know, representative of the population. So they look at older, younger, and people of different race, ethnicities, and physical health. And then after that, then the vaccine is given to tens of thousands of people and tested for effectiveness and safety. So they will give the vaccine to like 30 to 40,000 people, and they will monitor those people. There will be a control group of maybe 30,000 people who will get a placebo, and they will monitor them in case of the COVID. And after 5-6 months, they will look at number of COVID infection in the control group versus the vaccine. So that's how they come to say, well, we think the vaccine is working because at the end of the study group which received the vaccine had much, much fewer cases of COVID compared to the control group which received a placebo, which is really like water. So beside those studies, then the CDC, in case of the United States, which are one of the leading nations in terms of research on disease, there's an advisory committee which looks at the data presented by the researcher or the company and analyze the data independently and come up with a recommendation. And then they'll decide to approve. So the vaccine is only approved after all these steps are done and various teams of reviewers are sure that it works and is safe. So not only it works, but it has to be safe. So what about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? Just a little bit of information for those who want it. I don't need to go to this detail, but just want to put it up there. And the AstraZeneca vaccine, it's got a little bit of a different type of vaccine. It's made from a weakened version of a common cold virus called an adenovirus. So it's given in 2 doses, 28 to 84 days apart. And the efficacy is believed to be around 70%. And it is also effective against the Delta variant. It's not approved in the US for some administrative reason, but it is approved in the European Union, in the UK, Canada, and many more countries. I know everybody has heard about the blood clots occurring with AstraZeneca vaccine. Yes, they do occur, but they are very, very rare. The benefits far outweigh the risk. To give you a number, it's only 8 people per 1 million who get a blood clot after 1 dose. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 1 million doses given. And when you go to the second dose, it's only 2.3 people. So it's a very, very rare complication. So the question many people have asked is, why this vaccine came up so fast? You know, why? You know, some people will say we don't have the HIV virus vaccine, we don't have malaria vaccine. Well, things are different. We're probably going to go into Q&A, talk a little bit more about it. But the reason why the timeline was sped up is because there were already existing information. We already had helpful information about coronaviruses. So it's not like it's an entirely new virus. It was just a mutation or a variation in a group of viruses already known. That's number one. Number two, the US and other government invested a lot of money, billions of dollars, which we almost never see for any disease. And the reason so much money was invested is because this was a pandemic. The disease was many countries were getting it, so they had to do as much as possible. So the other reason is a lot of people participated in clinical trials. So we already had a big sample, which usually takes time to recruit, but in this case, there were many people, so it kind of sped up the process. And also, while the vaccine was being studied, it was already being manufactured. So the drug company actually took a bet. Normally what would happen is the drug company would wait for the study to come, the safety studies, and then if it's safe, then they will invest money. But in this case, they took a bet. They were like, well, we could wait, but people are dying, or we could take some risk. If we lose, we lose. If we win, then we make big. That's what Pfizer and Moderna did. So they already knew the vaccine was effective, but to have strong safety studies or result, they were supposed to wait for those results to come and then manufacture. They took a bet and said, we're going to manufacture anyway. If the safety results are not good, we're going to just throw away these vaccines if it's good. And they were lucky and they paid, and they just, the rest is history. So just a little bit of a way to look at it. If you look at the first one, the traditional timeline of how a vaccine is made. It starts from research in the lab, then you have initial development, then you go testing, right? You do the research, and then after the testing is successful, it goes to the FDA and type of board like that, where the data is reviewed and the vaccine gets approved. After it gets approved, then the manufacturing company take the vaccine, make it, and deliver it. So it takes time, that's normally. But in this COVID, because of the urgency, things were done a little different. Research just like here, research, then initial development like here. Then at the time of testing, even before the approval, manufacturing, which was here, started shortly after the testing. That was a bet the pharmaceutical company were taking because of the urgency of the matter. And this fact shortened the time significantly. That's why within 10 months, we could have a vaccine. So, and then they got a vaccine. They didn't get the final approval. They just get a emergency authorization use. And actually, only Pfizer got the final approval. And guess what? They only got it this week. So if we were to follow the traditional pathway, this vaccine could have not been ready now, maybe 2023. But because of this, thank God that was done, we have the vaccine, and then it went from here to delivery. So just to give you an idea of why the process was sped up. Now, questions, common question. Can I get a COVID-19 from the COVID-19 vaccines? The answer is no. The vaccines do not contain the live virus that causes COVID-19. This means that you can't catch COVID from the vaccine. Do the COVID vaccine have any side effect? Well, like anything else in medicine, yes, there are some side effects, but the serious side effects are rare. The most common side effect is feeling tired, headache, pain at the injection site, muscle and joint pain, chills, nausea and vomiting, fever. That's a common. So you look at some of the study, who was the Pfizer vaccine tested on? You can have the word. It was done in United States, Europe, Turkey, South Africa, and South America. You have the breakdown of the population who were studied. That's for the Moderna. That's for the Johnson & Johnson. So one of the questions, should someone with allergies get a COVID-19 vaccine? You should not get a COVID-19 vaccine if you have a history of severe allergic reaction to any ingredient of the vaccine. But those patients should be referred to allergy specialists to review the cases. But don't just go to any place and just get it if you have history of severe allergic reaction. For information, these vaccines do not contain eggs, gelatin, preservative, or latex, because I know many people are allergic to eggs. So there is no egg material in the vaccine. So if you're allergic to an egg, you shouldn't have a problem with this vaccine. So coming back to those who have a serious allergy, you need to discuss with your doctor before you go further. So people say, I would like to have a baby one day. Is it safe for me to get a COVID-19 vaccine? Yes, the CDC recommends COVID-19 vaccination for people who are trying to become pregnant, who might become pregnant in the future. And pregnant women can get it. And there is no evidence that fertility problem in women or men comes from the vaccine. Can someone who is pregnant or breastfeeding get a COVID vaccine? Absolutely, as I just said. So there is really no problem. Are the COVID vaccines safe for children? Probably, but we don't have full data. The Pfizer vaccine is authorized for people ages 12 and older. The question is why? Is because this is the groups which were studied. We don't just assume that something which is safe in an adult will be automatically safe in a child. As we like saying in medicine, children are not small adults. They are human beings in their own ways with some physiological particularities which have to be respected. So the early data suggests that it should be okay, but they need safety studies. So there are currently ongoing studies I'm aware of for some vaccine, I think from 6 months to 12 years. I think for the Pfizer, I don't know about the Mrna, but most likely it will be, but with the current knowledge we have, 12 years and older, safe. Younger people, we think by October, November, if not December, the data for the children between 6 and 12 years will come out, and maybe next year, the younger than that. Will a COVID-19 vaccine change my DNA? Absolutely not. The COVID-19 vaccine do not change or interact with your DNA in any way. Those vaccines, what they really do, they teach the immune system how to fight against a specific virus. Okay. Will the vaccine work against COVID-19 variant? So far, what we have, we know those vaccines are effective. But does that mean that all future variants will be sensitive to the vaccine? We do not know. These things need to be studied. That's why it's imperative that as many people as possible get vaccinated, so we do not have a reservoir of human beings which the viruses will use to multiply and eventually produce a variant which will be resistant to the current vaccine. Just think of it, with everything we've been through, God forbid, but if in the next couple of months or so, there is a new variant which is resistant to the current vaccine, guess what? We are all back to square one. We'll have to wait for the new vaccine. We'll have all of us to be vaccinated again. So the only way to protect or to prevent this is to make sure that the current virus we have is really stopped. And it can only get stopped if we follow the measures plus getting the vaccination. And then there will be fewer people and the likelihood of mutation producing new variant become extremely small. How long after getting the COVID-19 vaccine does it take to be effective? How long does it last? It usually takes a few weeks for the body to build immunity after vaccination. So, so that means it's possible a person could be infected with the virus that caused COVID-19 just before or just after vaccination. We've had cases, someone got a vaccine, a week later they got the virus and he went on social media, well, I was fine, I got a virus, you know, it's unfortunate, but the short answer is you need several weeks, you need to be fully vaccinated for you to be really protected. And the question about how long do we protect, we don't know for sure, but early data showing that those vaccines are good enough for 6 to 8 months. Okay. Do we need to keep wearing masks if we're fully vaccinated? This information is moving, but currently public transportation, healthcare facility, any indoor setting, we need to, because remember, the vaccinated people can still get a virus. They are more likely to get a severe illness, but they can contaminate other people. So if you are, and then if you are in an indoor with poor ventilation, you definitely need to wear a mask, because if you don't, you may get sick, but you may also not knowingly contaminate other people. The other thing we have to do, stay home and get tested if you feel sick. Isolate if you test positive for COVID-19. Who can help make decision about getting the vaccine? I think usually it's your doctor, your nurse, or your pharmacist. You know, that's what we're trying to do. That's the end of the slide, and we can go to the questions. Hello?
Yes, thank you very much, Doctor. This was very informative. I think we already have a couple of questions on the chat window. I think the first question was, why must now we don't wear masks for common flu?
We are encouraged to get masks for common flu. We do wear them. So I don't know, I'm not sure I understand the question. So the question is, why wear the mask for COVID and not for the common flu? Is that the question?
Yep.
Well, actually, we are supposed to wear the mask for the common flu. The reason it has not been so strongly advocated is because the common flu severity is not as bad as the COVID itself. That's why in the case of common flu, people are a little bit lenient, but the contamination is the same. And we should actually, like in the hospital where I work, it's widespread in the US, if during the flu season, people are encouraged to wear masks, particularly if you're not vaccinated. In Asian countries like in Korea and China, during the flu season, most people wear masks. So the short answer is, it's because it is not as severe as COVID. It doesn't cause as much problem as the COVID. That's why it's not being pushed that strong, if that makes sense. Okay.
All right, I see another question here, but I'm not sure I understand it. What is the two vaccines are given more than the allowable 3 to 4 weeks apart? How effective is it then? Maxine, I don't know if you can maybe elaborate on this question for doctor to be able to answer.
Yes, the vaccine, Pfizer, was not given the usual 28 days apart, the first and the second dose. In my case, it was given 9 weeks apart.
Yeah.
Because they want to make sure everybody gets at least one vaccine. So there weren't enough. So they allowed you to get it in 9 weeks. So my question is, how effective is it if you have to wait 9 weeks to get the second dose?
Yeah, that was proven to be very effective as well. That started mostly in the United Kingdom. Because when the vaccine became available, they decided to go up to 6 months apart to be able to vaccinate as many people as possible. It was based on theory. There was no much strong data, but what we know after the fact is it has worked really well. So yes, we do not know for what is the longest period. The recommendation is you stay as close as to the recommended time given by the manufacturer, but we know you can go up to 4 or 5 months in between vaccine and still works well.
So the minimum is what? 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
The minimum, as I say, depends on each vaccine. You know, AstraZeneca, you can go out to 84, and I think the other one is 3 weeks. So each manufacturer, again, those days were based on how they were studied, you know. So when they did the study, if they decided to do 3 weeks in between, or 5 weeks, or 6 weeks, when they ask for authorization, they are not allowed to ask authorization with parameters which are not studied. So if they did 6 weeks during the study, the FDA will approve for 6 weeks. But does that mean that if you go more than 6 weeks, it won't work? It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. It just means that that's what we know for sure that it works. So with time, as people start extending it, data keep coming in like they did in the UK. Now we know that even longer it works.
Okay, so we have another question here. My sister wants to get vaccinated, but she's scared. She wants to know which vaccine is best to get, which one has less side effects.
So the answer to the question is the best vaccine is the one which is available to you. So there is no evidence that one is superior to the other in terms of protecting people from getting severe illness. So the answer is whichever vaccine is available to you, among those 4 we mentioned, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson, any of them is as good as the other.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Kabeya, for your very interesting and pertinent talk. You mentioned that severe side effects related to vaccine and mainly AstraZeneca are very negligible. However, is it the case for specific groups such as women 40 to 50 years? How is the risk to get blood clot, and what is the risk of dying of that?
Yeah, so those blood clots, those very few cases where has been described, it has been mostly in older people. That's why in countries like in France, they only give they don't, there's a cutoff age. So the question, the risk of dying, if you get a blood clot, the risk of dying is severe. That's absolutely true. But the risk of getting the clot is small. However, those who get those blood clot, it's a pretty severe side effect.
All right, the second question is, you mentioned that the RNA used in the vaccine cannot get to the nucleus, thus cannot affect our genome. However, can you explain why some scientists and doctors worry about an enzyme called transpass, which can transcribe RNA to DNA? Do human beings produce such enzyme or not?
Well, those scientists mentioned that, I don't want to get it, but the knowledge is an RNA will not become a DNA. It just doesn't happen. I was telling you the technicalities, but the DNA is inside the nucleus. The vaccine, Moderna and Pfizer, do not get inside the nucleus. They work at the level of the RNA, which is inside the cell, but outside the nucleus. So there is scientifically no way for this particle, number one, to get into the nucleus, and number two, to become a DNA. It's just no way. It's just if you say to me, can an orange become an apple? There's no way that can happen. I know there's a lot of fear, but the science, the biology is very clear. Those particles, those mRNA do not get in the nucleus and cannot become DNA. And RNA doesn't become a DNA.
Okay, so folks, you don't have to put your question in the window. I mean, in the chat. If you want to ask directly, unmute yourself and ask. I'm just helping those who are shy and don't want to mute themselves, right? So if you have any questions. So another question here, how long until vaccinated people can stop wearing masks?
So that's a little tricky question. Let's put it this way. I will say this. when does a vaccinated person become fully vaccinated? This is not, has got nothing to do with the mask. I'm going to come to that. For the shot, when you get the second shot, about 2 weeks after the second injection, you become fully vaccinated. At that time, your risk of getting the infection and the disease is small. So you could stop wearing the mask 2 weeks after your second vaccination. However, there is a caveat. With the Delta variant we have now, because the disease is so widespread, because we have still so many unvaccinated people, vaccinated people, as I said, can still get a disease, but it's a milder form, and even problematic, they can also infect other people. So currently, even if you are fully vaccinated, indoors, you need to wear a mask. Outdoors, no mask. So to summarize, when do you stop wearing the mask? It's not a straightforward answer. Is you become fully vaccinated 2 weeks after the second shot. At that time, you can take off your mask except indoors, like public transportation, hospital, prisons, and all big churches, places like that. Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, go ahead.
Sir, here. I think you didn't read my question, but I just want to ask it to myself. Hi, doctor. Nice to have you here. Quick question. Is there any connection between COVID-19 and the blood type? And what group of people blood type that are more vulnerable towards the COVID? I mean, blood type AB, or O?
No, there's no evidence. As I said, we have really no evidence of who gets the vaccine, who gets the disease. Even furthermore, beside what we call comorbidities like bad diabetes, bad heart disease, we have no good way to tell who's going to get the severe illness. So I'm not aware of any association between blood types and risk of getting the COVID.
Okay.
Hi, Kwesi here. I have a question. Do the people who get blood clots, do they necessarily have pre-existing health conditions?
No, that's the thing with that was seen in AstraZeneca. There was no way to tell who was going to get it. So again, as I say, it's a very small portion, but there are no pre-existing disease. However, having said that, any person who has had history of blood clots in the past should be a little bit more cautious to get the AstraZeneca, just because they've had blood clot. Even that, it's not proven scientifically that if you've had blood clot, you will have it, but it's just out of abundance of cautions. But the clear scientific answers, no, there are no, so to speak, pre-existing condition which will make you at a higher risk of getting blood clot from the AstraZeneca vaccine.
And doctor, I know you are a Christian, you are a born-again Christian yourself. What will you say to those Christians who are scared, thinking that there is a chip in the vaccine, and then if they get vaccinated, they will be controlled and things like that? Is that true at all? And what do you say?
Absolutely not. This is just fear of the unknown. It has no biblical or scientific basis. So there's absolutely no reason to be. You know, my thinking is, you know, as I've been practicing medicine, I've been associated with science. The more you know science, the more you know medicine, the better you sense or you acknowledge or realize the greatness of God. Because as you deal with human beings, from babies to elderly, as you study the human body, you just see the greatness of God beyond all of that. And I truly believe that knowledge we get in science, in medicine, is God's given. I don't know why the devil will give us ideas, intelligence to treat cancer, to treat diabetes. Why would the devil do that? So all the knowledge we get, I think it's God inspired. What happening in the Christian community is not new. For people who know history, Galileo was killed he was condemned by the church because he dared to say the world was round, and people have to think. So science is what it is. Science makes us discover what God has done, and these are just fear, which I will classify as fear of the unknown. Is people become comfortable with what they know. When it's something which is new, they become very suspicious. But there is absolutely nothing to suggest or support those fears.
Sister Francine, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for the word. And thanks, Dr. Kabea, for your presentation. I have a couple of questions, so just bear with me. First is about the nature of the mRNA vaccine. So based on my research, I understand that it's different from the traditional vaccines, whereby they inject a weakened or inactivated germ into the body and let the immune system fight it, versus the mRNA vaccine. What's happening is it basically teaches ourselves to make a spike protein, which then create antibodies, right? And then to protect us. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so are there any other mRNA vaccines besides COVID-19 that you know of, or that is in the market?
No, these are the first mRNA vaccines. So your information is correct. Let me repeat it with a little bit more details. Some of these scientific details I was trying to leave them out, but because the questions are coming, I think we need to explain this. So I'm going to try to be as simple as possible. So in the process of making protein, the cells make protein. The information to make a protein is inside the nucleus as a DNA. So this information is transferred from the DNA to a specific site on the cell to make a protein. So the transfer of information from there, it's done by the mRNA. There are many types of mRNA. So if you try to remember that, that's how a protein gets made. When you go to the traditional vaccine, what was happening is they will give you a particle of a virus, or the weakened virus, or the killer virus. So you essentially get this foreign body in your blood. Your immune system recognizes it. And the immune system recognizes a foreign body by some of the protein, which are not human protein, which are proteins specific to that virus. And recognizing this protein, then they will start making the antibodies. So the scientists were kind of look at this. Why do we have to inject ourselves viruses to make our immune system produce antibody against the viral protein? So they come up with a very smart way of saying, okay, we're gonna fabricate an mRNA in the lab, which is gonna, I can say, trick the cell. So that's mRNA has information which is similar of information which will normally come from the DNA. So let me try this. The DNA is like where you store the information. The mRNA is like the messenger or the transporter who gets the information from the center, where the information is sent in the nucleus, and take it to the factory. So what the scientists have done is, okay, instead of us giving a virus, why don't we trick and create a messenger or a transporter? So they make this mRNA, they give that mRNA the information of the viral protein. So when the cells sees that mRNA, the cell perceives that this information comes from the nucleus, from the DNA, whereas the information does not come from the DNA, it comes from an injected particle. And the cell then starts making those proteins, which are viral protein. And that mRNA, the moment is injected, few minutes later, it's completely destroyed. And those proteins are made, so the immune system look at those proteins as foreign proteins and make the antibodies. So to answer your question, the Moderna and the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine are the first mRNA vaccine in the history of humanity. And this has been a breakthrough in science. And they already have HIV vaccine based on the same technology. The next 10 years are gonna be really huge in medicine because of this technology. So we're gonna see a lot of great stuff happening. Will there be some complication? Probably. As in anything, we will learn in the process. Like we learned from the polio vaccine, we learned from the measles vaccine, we learned from all those things. So the short answer is these are the two first mRNA vaccine in the history of humanity.
Thank you. So considering that the mRNA, vaccine has been studied by researchers for decades, according to information online, why do you think, or are you aware as to why it hasn't been introduced until now?
Because that's how research works. When people discover, when you get into a lab studying something, when it comes to science, biology, you have no idea. You cannot get into a lab, say, I'm going to find the cure of diabetes in 2 years. You have absolutely no idea. And I will tell you this, just to give you an example of medicines. I'm diverting a little bit from vaccination, but it's more or less the same principle. Each new medicine that you see on the market is a result of many, many years of research. And easily for you to get the good, perfect, or the acceptable molecule that you use for diabetes or high blood pressure, whatever, there have been other hundreds or even 1,000 molecules which were developed in the process, which were abandoned. Either they were difficult to make, or they were not effective, or they were toxic. So you have no way to know whether you're gonna need 6 months, 20 years, 50 years. It's a process. You learn, you make, you learn, and sometimes you discover just by luck. Sometimes is you have new technology. Sometimes you have a new disease. So the technology was there, but it had to be gotten better over the time. So that's why. And I think the COVID-19 was an opportunity to actually have those technology used in a widespread disease. Because when you have circumstances like COVID-19, it's a perfect situation to try to advance science. Why? Because there is an urgency. Scientists and doctors were faced with a very difficult choice. Do we let people die by millions? Do we let our health system be overwhelmed with people in the ventilator, in the floor? Do we let our medical personnel, nurses, doctors, lab, get a disease? Do we close down the economy and shut down the whole world because we are scared of a potential side effect of a vaccine? Or do we actually go based on this limited knowledge we have and try it? It was not an easy decision, but it was the less evil of the two circumstances. And thank God, so far, we have not seen those doom days which were predicted by some people. We have actually seen some good results. So a short answer to your question is no one can predict when a technology gets used. One quick example, internet. Now that we all use the internet, we use the Zoom meetings, how many years it took to get the internet? You know, people say that the United States Army had it maybe in the early 60s. If you look at computers, if you look at a computer in the 1970s, the computer which was less powerful than an iPhone today was the size of the living room. And today, the same information can be put in a small device that you keep in your pocket. Somebody could ask, why we didn't have it in the 1960s? Why did we have the iPhones only in the 2000s? Well, knowledge evolves.
Okay, thank you. So with that being said, we can conclude that the mRNA vaccines are basically an experimental vaccine because we have yet to learn more about them. Is that correct?
I don't like the word experimental because it's got a negative connotation. I would say it's a new technology vaccine. I would not call it experimental. Okay. Because when you say experimental, it means you do not have the data. But we have the data. We have experimented the vaccine. Let me give you an example. There are medicines which have been on the market for 20, 30 years. After 25 years, we discover, oh, this medicine, when you give it, you can have fetal malformation, or you can have cancer coming, or even we see it in the automobile industry. You have a car which you use, and then one day you get a recall. Say, well, you know what? We've just discovered that the computer system in this car was faulty. Was it experimental? No. So there is what you call the experiment, which is done before, and there is what you call post-market surveillance, which apply in every technology in everything in life. You can have some peanut butter that you use, and one day they say, well, there's a recall. So I would not call it experimental. I would call it new technology.
Okay, so for the sake of time, Sister Francine, let's give other people a chance to ask as well. Brother Glody, you also had some question. You want to go ahead?
Yes, I just have two quick questions. Okay, so, one of my main concerns about, getting the vaccine is because the reason why I was so hesitant to get it is because I found other natural remedies to get rid of the symptoms. Like, for example, there was one time where, I was having a really heavy fever and, I was losing my loss of taste and smell. And then, and then I informed one of my parents, to make me like, that I was experiencing these symptoms. And what my mother did is that she just did some steam therapy for me. Like I put my head over it. I put a towel over my head and then, I put my head close to like some steam, like from hot water, with some herbal oils in it. And then I did that for a couple of days. And then next thing you know, I felt better. I also like had some ginger tea as well. And then a couple of days, I started to feel more relief from the symptoms. So my question is like, how is the effectiveness of, natural remedies such as these? Like, how is it measured compared to getting the vaccine?
Well, so staying fair to science, in science, we measure everything. Most of those remedies have either not been studied or have studied and have been disappointing. The vaccine has been extensively studied, and I would say there's really no match. The problem where people get lost is people forget, and I try to really emphasize that there is a wide spectrum in the disease presentation. You have about 0.05% of people are going to die. What does that mean? It means 99.5% or 99.5, yes, are not going to die. And if the disease is in a small community, that's maybe okay, but when it's a pandemic, it becomes problematic. But what the complication which comes with that, and which I've seen a lot, is you'll see a lot of people who say, well, I got a COVID, I survived it. I just got a little cough or a little fever. It was just like a cold and everything. That's okay. And praise God that your COVID was mild. Now, what would you say to someone who lost his or her father from COVID? What would you say to someone who lost his or her spouse to COVID? So we have, when we talk about vaccine, It's not a therapy for one person. It's a public health issue. It just, I always give people an example. You close the eyes and you cross the road with your eyes closed and the car doesn't hit you. Would you really say it's safe to cross the road with your eyes closed because your eyes were closed? Or for people who drink, they drink and they drive, they don't get in an accident. Does that mean it's safe? It's not, because when we talk about public health, it's all about statistics. What are the likelihood? Let's talk about drinking and driving. Not everybody who drink will get an accident, but if you drink, the likelihood of getting an accident is high. Or you talk of some dangerous neighborhood. Not everybody who live in those neighborhoods get murdered, but if you walk in some neighborhood at a certain time, the likelihood of being murdered is high. So are you gonna say, well, I was in that neighborhood, I was there for a couple nights, I didn't die. Guess what? It's safe. So we have to sit back and look at the perspective of public health. Again, remember, the vast majority of people will not die from the COVID, but we have a small number of people who die and a small number who get in the hospital. It becomes a problem because this is a pandemic. If only like Ebola, for instance, it was localized, it didn't make big news. But once you have all the countries of the world being affected, even 0.05% become a big deal. So the short answer is the vaccine has been proven. These natural remedies either have not been proven, and those have just not been tested. And I know in Africa, for instance, in the DRC in Congo and many other countries, when the first wave and the second wave came, people had all sorts of remedies. They were, celebrating that, wow, those remedies are protecting us. Unfortunately, when the Delta wave came, there have been a lot of death in those countries, a lot of sick people. So people, I think vaccine really is the way to go.
Okay, so we're gonna go to Olivier, Mosanda, and Jacques. Olivier, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm there. Thank you, Papi, and good evening, Doctor. Very informative information, and I believe we don't have enough time, unfortunately, but it's okay. A very simple question. What is your thought about cocktails vaccines? Because, sometimes we run out of stock in some countries and we need to mix vaccines. So I just want to know what's your thought about that.
So again, in science, everything has to be studied. I would not recommend something which was not studied. By cocktail, my understanding is mixing two different vaccines. Is that what you mean, Olivier?
Yes, like for example, you mix Pfizer with Moderna.
Oh, are you talking about like you get your first injection Pfizer and the second injection Moderna?
Yeah, one dose Pfizer, the first dose Pfizer, the second dose Moderna.
So that's not recommended, but it seems like it's not so bad. But again, the data is limited. Remember, those studies were done by the companies which made those vaccines. So there was really no one who went to study Moderna plus Pfizer. Theoretically speaking, it could be okay. But again, in science, we want to stick to what has been studied. I don't want to give an information here which was not proven, because I won't be doing justice to you.
Okay, Jacques, go ahead.
Hey, thank you so much. Hey, doctor, thank you so much for those useful information. So I do have a simple question as well. I just want to know if there is a molecule or a medication that can cure coronavirus. And then a follow-up question of that is, so the only way to fight coronavirus is to get the vaccine?
A very good question. We don't really have a medicine. There is some monoclonal antibody, which is very expensive, which seems to work when given to some people, but all other medication, ivermectin and others, not really, we don't really have a good cure for the coronavirus. Currently, the best way to protect, number one, is the vaccine. Number two is to follow all these recommendations about social distancing, masking, and avoiding public places. But the thing which is gonna take us out of this mess, based on today's knowledge, is the vaccine. Maybe tomorrow there'll be something else, but prevention is better than treatment itself. Why take a chance of getting the disease to be treated? Because again, there are two things I would like you to remember from this talk, if you can forget everything else. The first thing I want you to remember that you have no way to tell if you get a disease, whether it's going to be severe or not. You have no way. There is no blood test. There is no blood type. There is no age, no race, no whatever level of education or Christian or religion, which will put you at a higher risk or lower risk of getting the sickness. So that's what maybe scares a lot of people in the medical community. You'll have two identical twins. One get a mild disease, the other one end up in ICU. So since you don't know how the disease is gonna, if you get it, why take a chance? Because yes, there could be a medicine which gonna treat, but why take a chance? The vaccine, what it does is it prevents you from getting the infection. If you get an infection, you are less likely to have a severe disease, less likely to be admitted, less likely to be on a vent, less likely to die. I didn't say no, I said less likely. So, two things to remember: disease is not predictable, vaccine is the best shot we got.
Okay, JLK, can you go ahead with your question? JLK? Okay, I saw a question here from JLK, so let me just read it. One of the main concerns about vaccine now is safety of the methodology. If the RNA technology is safe, why was it not authorized before COVID-19? I think you already answered that, Doctor. How long was it the third phase of clinical phase? How long is the third phase of clinical phase supposed to take place before finally validation by FDA, CDC? I'm not sure I fully understand that question.
Yeah, so I think the question is about how much time we need before we get full authorization. So as I said, we received full authorization for Pfizer, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday or last week, I remember. And it is expected to get a full authorization for Moderna and the Johnson & Johnson AstraZeneca very soon. So a year into the vaccine world, we have millions of people vaccinated. People are being monitored. So we have that. So we are at the point of getting the full authorization. We already got it for Pfizer.
And his second question is, as believer, how should we react about obligated vaccination for church attenders?
So again, I'm going to stick to science and to medicine. To me, from a medical standpoint, there is no difference between church and any other gathering. So if church is a building, if church has people inside, if those people can have the disease, if those people can contaminate others, it should, whatever is applied for similar gathering should be applied for churches. We know pastors have died from COVID, and some eminent pastors with good credentials. So, you know, the knowledge of vaccine was given to us by God to use. I mean, that's what I'm going to say.
Okay. JLK, do you have any other question before we move to also?
Brother Papi, I have a question, small question. Just.
Okay, go ahead, Gino. Oh, sorry, Gino, before you answer, before you ask, let's go to also, because he raised his hand before you, then Serge will ask you a question.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Willie. In fact, I have a question for you and a question also for Papi. What do we do with our children who are not eligible for the vaccine yet, the under 12? And for Papi with the ministry, how do we fight the hesitancy in terms of God will take care of us?
Good one.
Should I start first? Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, for the children less than 12 years, we need to do what we were doing before we got a vaccine: social distancing, masking. It can be very challenging for small children, but unfortunately, that's what we have. Masking when they go outside, try to avoid gathering. So the common measures that we all used before the vaccination was available. That's what we should use for our children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So especially for school, some of us are kind of worried sending the kids, those of us who have kids under the age of 12, sending them to school. Yeah,
it's very challenging. Yes, some schools, the remote learning has its own problems, as we all know by now. Remote learning is not easy. It's hard on the parents. It's hard on the kids. The learning is not as good. But if children have to go to school, they have to mask and they have to do social distancing. Absolutely.
Okay, so I will answer when you say for Christian, when they say God will protect us. Well, we have to do what we can do, and then what we cannot do, God will do, right? So you cannot eat and say God will take care of me. So you eat, you bath, you take care, you brush your teeth. There are certain things that God expects us to do on our own, and what we cannot do, God will take care of that. That will be my answer. Serge, can you go ahead, and then we're gonna take Pixel 3.
Yeah, thanks, Brother Pepe. So my question is just regarding the travel vaccine, right? So for someone who's preparing to travel in Africa, there are certain vaccines we need to go through, yellow fever, tetanus. So my question is there any study done in terms of the combination of existing COVID-19 vaccine and yellow fever and the other vaccine that we normally use before traveling to Africa?
So far, the knowledge is there is really no medication or other vaccine which interfere with the COVID-19 vaccine.
Okay, there's no interfere. Okay, that's good.
No.
Okay, Pixel 3, sorry, I don't know your name, so just go ahead with your question.
Hi, my name is Kwesi. So I just have two quick questions. One of it was in the chat earlier, but it wasn't addressed. It was that, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the doctor said that the vaccine lasts up to about 8 months. And my question to that is that, does that mean we need to get revaccinated every 8 months? Mm-hmm. Then my second question is that I believe the politicization of the situation is what created the conspiracy theories. Some politicians are downplaying it. Some are exaggerating it. So people are kind of like being swung back and forth. So, but one thing, by God's grace, though, the data has remained consistent. The recovery rate has been disproportionately higher than the death rate, even with the variant. So to most people, it's like, oh, we are doing really good. Like, things are not that bad, but in the news, you always hear about the dead, right? So my question to the doctor is like, for the new measures that governments are trying to take, for example, the COVID passport and things like that, isn't that extreme measures? Aren't they using a hammer to kill a fly?
Okay, so if you can just repeat the first question quickly, then I will go to the second, because the second is a bit longer. What was the first question?
The first one was just that I believe you said that it's about 8 months, the immunity.
Yeah. Okay.
So because it's keep retaking the vaccine every 8 months?
Okay, so yeah, thank you for the question. Very, very good question. So again, COVID-19 is a new disease. We learn as we go. I know people get frustrated. Well, you told us this 3 months ago, now you're changing again. Well, we're learning as we go. The vaccine was started about December 2020. I was one of the first ones to get it. And so what has been done is the level have been followed. And it seems like after 6 months, the level of antibodies are dropping. And one of the first studies which was done in Israel where they actually show that people who got vaccinated after 6 months, the level of antibodies were dropping. So the question you're asking is, are we going to have to be vaccinated every 6 or every 8 months? Less likely. Let me explain. The one thing which we've noted, which has been noted with the COVID-19, is it's a more stable virus compared to the flu virus. I'm sure you're all familiar that every year there is a different strain of flu, and every year we have to get a new flu vaccine because the flu virus is a very unstable. It has a lot of mutation. It has a big variability. So the vaccine used in 2018 for flu won't be effective in 2019. The COVID, on the other side, is more stable. You do not see much variability. So what needs to happen is to reach what we call herd immunity, meaning we need to vaccinate the majority, a large majority, like 80% plus of the world population. If we reach that, chances are we're not going to need to get vaccine because the disease will be almost suppressed, if not completely suppressed. Because if humans are vaccinated, remember the virus cannot multiply outside of a human body. If everybody or a large number of people are vaccinated, the virus has nowhere to go and it will just disappear and we don't need a vaccine. As long as we have a substantial population who remain unvaccinated, that becomes a cause of concern, and that exposes us to the risk of new variant. So the answer to your question will be maybe, maybe not, depending on how we get the population vaccinated. Coming to the same question, your last comment was, to summarize your question was, are we using a hammer to kill a fly? Absolutely not. And you would say also that the news focus on what is bad. Well, the reality is things are pretty bad. Now, I work in a hospital and I've been practicing medicine for 30 years. I haven't seen anything like this. I remember in the earlier part of this year and the last part of last year, we were at a situation where we're running almost out of bed in intensive care unit. And there are many places in the world, even in the United States, where people were running out of bed. People were dying in the hallways. So if you have a disease like that, I don't think anything you do to prevent people from getting it would be considered a hammer for a fly. You know, again, people are not the frontline workers, have no idea. It's like soldiers who go to war. People who stay back home, if the war is not in your neighborhood, you don't feel it. But ask the people who are the front line, who are coming back in bags, who are, you know, dodging bullets, who are being killed, who come back with PTSD. For them, it's a big, big thing. So the notion that this disease is exaggerated, it's not correct. I mean, for about 100 years, we've never had a single disease affecting so many people in such a short time. And if the vaccines and all these things were not done, we would have had a disaster. We'd have had maybe 10 times more death. So it's not being exaggerated. In fact, we're not doing enough. That's my opinion.
So, doctor, what do you say to people who have suffered from COVID, they didn't die, and then they say, well, I don't need a vaccine because I suffered from it already?
Well, that's a mistake, because studies showed, I think, about 2 or 3 months after the disease, your antibodies that you get from the disease, for some reasons, go away quicker than the antibodies you get from the vaccine. It's not understood exactly why. The belief is maybe during the disease, your immune system is weakened by the disease itself. Therefore, you don't mount as much of an immune response that someone would get the vaccine. So I have patients that I know personally, some of my patients who got a disease twice. Some even got it 3 times. So even if you got the disease,
you can get it multiple times.
Oh yes, I have patients who got it 3 times. One patient, but I have few who got it twice. My own patients. Yes, and this patient, we had it about 2 weeks ago. She had the first time in March 2020, no, in May 2020. And when the vaccine came available, she turned it down because she said she got a disease, she didn't want it. And guess what? She got it in July or August 2021. And now she's begging to get a vaccine. We're gonna give her a vaccine now. So yes, yes, having gotten the disease give you immunity for about 3 months, but after that you need to be vaccinated.
Okay, so we're running out of time. There is a question from JLK again. Thank you very much, doctor, for explaining how the vaccine works. Very helpful. Can you comment on AstraZeneca? I have heard that it contains some impurities which cause the blood clots. Those impurities are from human tissues or cells used to produce the vaccine. Do you think this is an issue?
No, this is not an issue. I think people sometimes get confused by what comes in the news. Now and then you'll have a specific batch or series of a medication or of a vaccine being recalled. I remember there was a batch of AstraZeneca vaccine. That particular group of vials were contaminated and those ones were stopped. That had nothing to do with the vaccine itself. So just like, again, as I said, you have cars being produced at Toyota, and then they say, okay, you know, the Toyota made between 2016 and 2017 should be recalled because the airbag is problematic. Does it mean all Toyota had a problem? No, this was a problem which occurred in that timing. So yes, there was some AstraZeneca vaccine which were recalled. Those, it was a specific batch, a series which was contaminated, but this is not with the whole vaccine itself. The whole vaccine is fine. As I said, the blood clot has been very, very few, about 8 per million cases. And it's got nothing to do with impurity. It's just the nature of the vaccine. In some people, it triggered that reaction.
And doctor, what would you say? We see some scientists and doctors on YouTube and who also are in the medical field, but they speak against the vaccine. So which is kind of confusing for the people who are not in the medical field. So how do we react to that? Because we tend to hear them as well because they are scientists and doctors.
Yeah, so that's a big challenge of the information era we live in, right? So for those who are of my age or older, we remember that 25, 30 years, 40 years ago, source of information were limited. So the source of information were relatively controlled. It was difficult from anyone from his basement or his backyard to come up with some kind of theories and spread it over the world. The best you could do is to talk to your friend. Now today with the social media, everybody has a microphone. I can in my basement tonight make a video, mix salt and sugar, put some speed in it, and say it cures malaria. And some people are gonna say, well, there is a doctor, he's an American doctor, he said it, it's gotta be true. So what I'm going with this, I'm going with this that it's something the world has to learn. With information technology that's as we have it today, we're living in the information era where anybody can have his message reach the whole world. So the world is going to learn how to deal with it. As for those doctors, I don't know what the motivations. Are they manipulated? It's possible. I think there was a report which came, I think from the FBI a few months ago, that most of the misinformation about the COVID came from a small group of people, like 10 people, and most of them were in Russia. I don't know. Some of them just expressing their own fears. I don't know, but I would say this, like I always tell even my children, my friend, stick to the logic. Let's stick to what is known. When you want to get information, You have to go to the trusted website. If you want to know the word of God, you go in the Bible. If you want to know how to use your Samsung TV, you get the Samsung booklets, how to do it. You know, so everything has its authority. Like I posted something, you know, which is a little bit funny. Someone says, if you arguing with a scientist about science and you're not a scientist, there is no disagreement. You're just wrong. And I had somebody, a family member, who said to me, well, he doesn't agree with that. The scientist does not have monopoly of the knowledge. And my answer to him was, would you then argue with a pilot how to pilot an airplane? He said, you got me there. Yes. So we have to remember that we have to use our judgment. We have to use our judgment. We live in an era where there will be a lot of information. We have to know how to live with it. And my recommendation is check the source. Check the source. One of the questions I ask people when they come and say a lot of stuff about the vaccine, I ask them, do you drink Coke? Yes, I do. Do you know who made Coke? Coca-Cola. Do you know when it was discovered? How are you sure that the Coke you're drinking is not contaminated? They take a pause. Well, because it has been this, yeah. When you take tap water, you drink it. Why do you trust it? Because the company in Canada who look at water tells you you can drink your tap water. When you get in an airplane to fly to Africa or Europe, in the air, it could crash. Why do you trust it? It's because you know that the pilot have to go through some rigorous training and there is blah, 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 blah. We cannot live a life where we have full knowledge in everything. It's impossible. There's gotta be trust. And the way we trust, that we go to the people in charge. For you to trust the water you drink, it has to be certified by a certain company. For you to trust the meat you buy in the superstore, it must have been verified by a certain company. For you to trust your family physician, it must be registered with the Ontario or British Columbia College of Doctors. For you to trust a school and your teachers, it has to be accredited. For you to trust a college, I can go on and on and on. Are we going to start checking the training of our children's teacher? Are we going to start training where our doctors came from? Are we going to start testing the meat we buy? Are we going to start testing the water we drink? We're going to be crazy. So the same logic, when you get medical information, go to the trusted sources, the CDC, the FDA, the American College of Medicine, the European, all these bodies are bodies which job is to make sure the information. If you get information from anybody from YouTube, you're putting yourself at risk. You're putting yourself at risk. You're not going to make your child do homeschooling from a YouTube class of which you don't know the origin. You're not going to say, someone says, God says this, if he doesn't read the Bible. So let's use our judgment. We are all intelligent human beings. We have all been given the ability to make a judgment and a decision. Every information we receive has to be analyzed on its merits. And if it's not something in your field, check with the relevant authority in the field. I can discuss COVID. I'm not going to discuss nuclear physics with a physicist. I'm not going to argue with Pastor Papi about some story or the Bible. It is what it is. Everybody has his field, and that has to be respected. I know it's a long answer, long-winded answer, but I think it needs to be elaborated because this is the greatest challenge we have.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for this wonderful presentation, question and answers. I know we're not going to finish all the questions, but we are really, really out of time. I know some people still have questions, but we got to let Doctor go because he was supposed to be here only until 9:30, but he stayed so that he could answer some of our questions. I'm going to hand over to media for the announcement quickly, and then we're going to close with a word of prayer. But before I do that, Doctor, what's your last word?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed. All questions were very good and very interesting. There is no such thing as a stupid question. All questions asked were in a good spirit, and I really, really appreciate them. I think these are the kind of activities which will be done in many places so that we can finally push away this COVID and crush it once for all. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Okay, announcement, media department.
Welcome to Word of Life Christian Center Toronto.